Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Ask a Career Coach. My name is Martin McGovern, and today we are pulling together the internet to answer your biggest career questions. Cover letters. How do you write a good one? Are they necessary? All the ins and outs of the cover letters. So if you have questions about cover letters, start putting them in the chat right now. We got Karen in the chat. She'll be collecting all of your questions and passing them along to me throughout the conversation. Couple things to know. I am not a developer, so there are some technical questions that I won't be able to go into as much detail on as I would hope. But for all the other questions around how to apply for jobs, how to network, how to interview well, all that stuff, let's get into it. I realize my microphone is actually on the wrong setting, so I'm going to change that real quick so that we have a little less of an echo. I hope that sounds good on your end, and we'll be getting into the questions in just a minute. I'm going to wait about 5 minutes before we jump all the way in, because we just want to give people time to join from around the world. So if you are joining the chat right now, give us a shout. Let us know where in the world you are joining us from. And if you are a returning viewer or if you are a new viewer, I'm curious to see all the familiar faces as well as everyone who is joining us for the first time. Excited to jump into our topics today, so let's get the conversation started. All right, we got folks sharing their Instagram, so if you want to connect on Instagram, go check them out. We got a hey there from Indonesia. Welcome, Aris. Austin, Texas, my old stomping grounds. I'm joining us from Chicago today. It's actually pretty brisk and nice out today. All right, we got someone, a fourth session returner. Thank you for coming back 4 times to ask questions and engage in the group. Oh, we got Ankush coming from the initial days of the initiative. I love the alliteration there. Thanks for joining us. Looks like you're all recognizing each other as well. I love it. One of the great things about these sessions is you can actually connect with each other and support each other outside of our Q&A. So if you have a LinkedIn profile or some other way that you'd like people to connect with you and stay in touch, please share it in the chat and we can all keep in touch with each other. We got Mohammed from Egypt. It's their first time on the live stream today. Thanks for joining us. We got Savani from India, first timer. Sanjeev, it's a 4th timer. Thanks for joining us again. It's midnight in India. Dang, y'all are staying up late. I love it. Atlanta, Dominican Republic. Oh, wow. We got people from all over the world joining us again. It's so exciting to be able to hear your questions and offer as much advice as I can. Again, this is more of a conversation than a dictation. So if you have other ideas that you want to share in the chat, if things pop into your head that you're like, I've encountered that, here's a link, share it, help everyone out. We're all in this together. So don't feel like, I'm the one with all the answers. We all have a lot of knowledge that we're bringing to the table, a lot of different types of experience. And if we work together, we can really help each other build an amazing career. So we're about 5 minutes in. We'll be getting started with the initial question. And I'm going to just give a shout out if you have career questions on your mind already, whether they're related to cover letters or not, start putting them in the chat and Karen will be passing them my way. All right, looks like we got a couple of questions coming in. All right, everybody. We're going to start with the question of what makes a great cover letter. What makes a great cover letter? It's a big question, and it's changed over the years. I actually saw something pretty funny on LinkedIn this morning. Someone had posted a resume from 1950. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, if it's real or not, but it was pretty funny looking. It basically had the person's name, their height, their hobbies, which was like weightlifting, and the fact that they were in the army. And that was the entire resume. And the joke that I think someone wrote, maybe it's real, maybe it's not, was that they got 12 offers. Who knows, right? But it was a really funny thing because it just kind of shows the complexity of the job search and how it's grown over the years. You know, back when my grandparents came to the United States, what my grandpa had to do was basically get some tools, go to a bricklaying site where they were building a building and say, do you need help putting up that wall? I mean, that's the best networking ever, right? You go straight to the hiring manager and you see if they need help. And it was all about them. But that's really all he had to do. He never had to, create an account on LinkedIn because computers weren't really a thing back then. So what we are trying to do with all of this work that we're putting out there and creating with all these profiles and all these applications is we're trying to get to the decision maker, right? That's what we're really trying to get at the end of the day. And so the question is, how do you get closer to the decision maker and how do you convince them that you're the person that can help with the job? Well, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you are writing everything from the perspective of I'm here to help, not from the perspective of I want a job. And the way you do that is you change your language a little bit. Most people start their cover letters with I or me or my name is, right? These are triggers that show an employer that you're not really in it for them. You're in it for yourself. And if we're going into the job search with that mindset, with a me first mindset and not a you first or them first mindset, we're going to be putting ourselves in a disadvantage because when they ask us questions like, why do you want to work here? We're going to say, because I want to get paid, right? That's the cliche. It's like, why do you want to work here? Well, I want money to pay rent. Okay, great. But what makes you different than the next person? So what we want to do is really think about these companies that we're applying for. And the reason I bring this all up is because one of the reasons that people don't want to write cover letters is because they're just sending mass applications out through these job portals. And they say, well, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time writing cover letters if they're not even going to read them. Well, that's a fair point. They're not going to read them. If you're not going to put the effort into the application, why should they put the effort into reading your application? Think about it. If you are only going to spend 10 seconds applying to a job, why should they spend any more than 10 seconds looking at your stuff? And so that's where we have to really change our perspective. We should really narrow the types of companies we're looking at and batch them so that we can be more specific with our outreach. We should know people who are at the company. We should write good cover letters and we should apply knowing that maybe this is the right role, but if not, there could be other ways that I can help. If you go in with a how can I help mindset, opportunities open up. So instead of writing a cover letter from the perspective of me, I, look at me, we write it from your company is trying to do these amazing things. I'm also working on building those technologies and working towards that awesome ideal future, whatever the thing is that they're trying to build. Together, we can actually do some really cool things. So first paragraph, and keep them short, you're up to all these amazing things. Second paragraph, I am also really interested in those things, and here's some examples. Third paragraph, together, we can make these projects happen. So that's a really interesting way to say you, me, us, instead of me, give me, right? So I want us to think about that when it comes to the cover letter and when it comes to any networking outreach that you're going to do in general. And another thing that you want to think about when it comes to cover letters is length. Now, length is a hotly debated topic in the career coach space. Some people say, a 2-page, 3-page resume is totally fine. I personally, coming from a marketing background, understand that people will not spend time reading and will just basically skim through things. And the shorter you can make it, the better. Think about a pamphlet versus an ad, right? An ad is easier to quickly understand than a pamphlet. So it doesn't mean that there's not, use usefulness for pamphlets if you're sitting in a doctor's office and you have 20 minutes to kill. But if you're trying to get attention fast, you really need to make it concise. And the same thing goes for cover letters. When cover letters first came out, they were actually letters because we would mail in our resume to companies. So we would write a cover letter, we'd stack it on top of our resume, we'd fold them over each other, put them in an envelope, stamp that, and send that in. And doing that is going to, and sorry, we have some noise in the background here. And doing that is going to cause you to make a very formal cover letter. So a very formal cover letter is Dear Madam or Sir, with a date and an address and all these different things, which is what you would actually do in a letter, back in the 80s or something. But we don't live in that world anymore. How many letters have you sent out in the past 2 months? Probably not a ton. Maybe your rent paycheck? I don't know. Or your rent check? I don't know. So what we want to do is mimic the way that people are actually talking nowadays and the way that people actually communicate. So, of course, this depends on industry and depends on company and depends on a lot of different things. If it's a very formal company, you want to be a little more formal. If it's laid back startups, you want to be a little more laid back. But think about how we email. Even 5 to 10 years ago, when you would do a cover letter, you'd write a full page cover letter and you'd fill all that space because we were writing long emails with many paragraphs. And then people got sick of that kind of communication. People stopped reading emails that were more than a paragraph to 3 paragraphs long. And even 3 paragraphs is pushing it on an email these days. If someone sends me something that has 5 different things in it, I'm not going to read it. You need to have 1 point per email, right? And as we get into this world of Twitter and different things like that, we start to realize that the more concise you can be, the faster you can make your point, the easier it is to understand what you're trying to say in the first place and help you out. And so when you think about a cover letter, try to keep it to 3 paragraphs, 3 short paragraphs or less, at least in my opinion. I'm sure there are caveats here and I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but I just know from experience and from talking to recruiters that they're probably not going to read a full page dissertation about your work history. So I like to say, make the first paragraph about them. This is what you're working on and why it's exciting. This is the second paragraph about you. This is what I'm doing, how it relates to what you're doing, and why it's so exciting. Maybe give an example of some of your work. And then here's what we can do together related to the job at hand, and say, I can't wait to continue the conversation and work with you. So I just laid out a whole lot of cover letter stuff. I know it was probably a real fire hose for y'all, but if you have more questions about the cover letter, please put them in the chat. Karen will forward them my way, and we'll get in even deeper to each one of these topics. One last thing, so I'm looking at the chat here. Does every cover letter have to be this amazing, unique story that you've written from scratch? I don't think so. I think you can actually formalize quite a bit of it, especially if you have a very specific job search in mind. Like, I know I want to work in this industry at companies like these. If you know you want to work in this industry at companies like these, most of them will have the same mission, the same goals. So you can actually create a form cover letter that addresses generally that industry. And then you can switch out the names, maybe change some of the specifics, and be able to customize more quickly than starting from scratch every time. And I'll actually give an example of a really bad cover letter that I wrote back in college. This is probably 2008, 2009. I wanted to work at a large advertising firm in Chicago. And gosh, I'm thinking back on it right now, and it's so lame what I did. It's so lame. I wrote this like almost 3-page, 2 to 3 page like essay. And I think they had some like essay questions in their application process, but it was like back when I was a little kid and I was watching TV, I saw this commercial and it was really inspiring. And I like told these really long, detailed stories, and I wasn't that great of a writer. So it was like, it dragged on. I almost want to go back and find that, see if I can find that somewhere in an old email or something, and just see how how bad it was, and just realizing like, I was in the mode of college, right? You write 3 to 5 page, 3 to 10 page, 3 to 20 page essays about like Irish history or something like that. So I was in the mode of writing these very long, drawn out essays. And there's a big difference between an essay for class and a cover letter for a job. Needless to say, didn't get that internship. So keep it concise, keep it focused, and if you're trying to get in touch with people, make it more about them than you. All right, let's jump on into your questions. Rahul, how can I make my CV better? This is a great question. All right. Your CV. This is a really interesting question because there are a number of different things you can do. Primarily when I see people's CVs or resumes or whatever it might be, the problem that comes up is that they are, number one, not well formatted. Number two, they are long. They're too much, and they include a lot of irrelevant things. Number three, they don't actually talk to a person in a way that that person can understand. So let me get into a little bit more of the specifics of that. If your CV or your resume is not well formatted because you just opened up a Word doc and started typing, try and go online and Google resume and CV templates. I went to school for graphic design. That was my minor, and even I use templates in creating my resumes because at a certain point, back in college when I was doing graphic design, I had a website that I built from scratch, a resume that I built from scratch in Adobe Illustrator, I think, and I had everything matching and everything looking really solid and stuff like that. Now, at a certain point, that gets to be very complicated. It takes a lot of time. Every time you need to make an edit or an update, you have to change everything on it. A lot of people try to think of their resume as an art piece or something along those lines. And unless you're going to go like way towards the other end of the spectrum and create a website that's like an interactive resume or something, I think templates are a really great way to go because it's more about the clarity of conveying the information than the creativity in how you put it together, in my opinion. Now, this is different if you're in design. This is different in a lot of different areas. But just in general, for the majority of people, using a template is going to help you save time and just make everything much cleaner. And so what I use Google Doc templates, and I customized it a little bit. The one I downloaded had a picture on it, so I took that off and changed some margins and things so I could fit more information. But in general, try to use things that help make things easier to read. So same thing with my website. If you're not, building websites every day, let's say you're a marketer or something like that, try to use template sites. Use things that make it easier to update, edit, and change. Because what ends up happening is people spend so much time worried about formatting that they never actually get it done and they never actually send it out, or they send it out with errors. So you want to be nimble. You want to be able to move quickly with the job search. You want to be able to make adjustments and changes on the fly. Create a new project, add it to your resume. Create a new thing, add it to your resume. Moving quickly is very important when applying for jobs. So how do you make it better? One thing could be to use templates. The other thing is to keep it short so that people will actually read through it. And then the third thing, what did I say? Shoot, I lost my train of thought. Oh, the third thing is make it tell better stories. A lot of our resumes, especially if you're in a technical space, are written for the way that you think about your project. Used certain API to blah, blah, blah. Then an HR person gets it who's not technical and they have no idea what your resume is saying, right? So try to put it into context. Again, your resume is a bit more of a sales document than just repository for all of your technical information. So when you are thinking about putting together your CV, for each bullet point, try and tell a story. If I were to ask you about any single bullet point on your CV, what story would you be able to tell me? If the answer is I don't have a story to go along with that, we might want to take another look at those bullets. So for instance, um, built an app utilizing, this program and this API in order to create what? So in order to improve the user's experience, in order to organize the, let's say it's like a sorting movies app. So built an app utilizing these programs and APIs in order to filter movies for date night or something like that. Make it a little more, maybe even date night is too much, but make it a little bit more of a story that anyone can understand, even if they're not technical. So I would definitely go down that route. Try and format it in a way that's easier, and then try and tell the story in a way that's easier for more people to understand. Give your resume to someone who is not technical and see if they can understand what you actually do. If they can't, you might need to add in some more detail. All right. I love this. Our next question is from Dev. If we are not applying for a paid job, but a volunteer role, do we apply the same advice to the cover letter? I personally would. I think that the better you are at being concise and making it about them, the better everything is. And actually, for a volunteer organization, you might want to make it more about the cause that they are um, supporting. And so, even bigger than any of these things, though, is making sure you know someone at the company. If you don't know anyone at the company, it's hard to get a volunteer job because who are you applying? Like, what role are you applying to? Are there volunteer roles being posted online? There might be. I found a few volunteer career coaching jobs online for like, uh, you know, different types of communities. And so, but I would definitely push back and say, how are you finding these volunteer roles, and who exactly are you talking with? Um, because that's going to be the bigger piece of the puzzle. And then once you're actually talking with someone, write your cover letter. Just picture them in your head. Be like, what do they care about? They need help doing these things. I can help do these things. Together we can accomplish this project. And that's going to be how you really make it stand out. So I would apply the same advice. And then I'd also try and picture who I'm writing it to, because chances are if you're trying to volunteer, someone at the company. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. But if you have more questions around that, let me know. I'm just trying to picture the volunteer role that you're going for and how that would play out. But I think that the same points hold true. All right, Sanjeev, are cover letters always addressed to a hiring manager, or should we tailor it according to the recipient? If so, how should we tailor? For example, is it good to add in technical topics depending on who we're addressing? Follow-up question, what do you do? What if you don't know whom to address it to? All right, so this gets into some of the nitty-gritty of actually how do you put this together and who do you send it to? A lot of times a cover letter in today's application programs, LinkedIn, Indeed, things like that, it's a box that you fill out on the application form, or it's an attachment that you include. So how do you actually do this? Most of the time, we don't know the name of the person that we are sending this to. Even if we know someone at the company or have met a hiring manager or something like that, there's other people that might read this cover letter. How do you address it? And I want to preface this by saying there is no one perfect answer. But I can tell you the way that I've started to think about it lately. And I think about it more as like when you create a post on LinkedIn, or something like that. When you're trying to share something with a lot of people, you don't address it to any one person. So what do you actually say? Like, how do you address it? I almost don't. I just move past the dear whomever, because I'm trying not to be that formal anymore. I don't think formality in cover letters is going to be the way that they continue to go in the future. I think they're going to get less and less formal, just like most of the job search. And so I think just jumping right into the first paragraph without a dear madam or sir is probably the best way to go. If you're hesitant on that, you could just say, um, you know, dear hiring manager, or something like that. I don't know. That's so hotly debated. I will say I'm not 100% sure on what the current standards are for this, just because it's changing so rapidly. So if anyone has suggestions of what they know have worked for them, put them in the comments, because this is one I'd like to explore a little bit more and get a bit more varied opinions on. But I do think that for me in general, things are getting less and less formal. So what could happen is you just say, dear hiring manager, or I really don't like the phrase to whom it concerns. I think it's just so old school and anyone who reads that is like, what era are we living in? Is this a Shakespearean play I'm about to read? And so if you don't know who you're addressing it to, just say, write it like a general email. Hey, comma, and then jump into it, right? I think that that's probably the easiest way to still intro it with a hey, but then get right into the meat and potatoes of it and not worry too much. And if you're copy and pasting it into the form on the job application form, you definitely don't need to address it. I think you can just copy and paste it like an essay. So yeah, that would be my recommendation there. Our cover letters always addressed to the hiring manager. They're not. Sometimes they go to HR. Sometimes they go to hiring managers. Sometimes they get passed around. So I almost think putting a very specific person's name on it isn't always the best way to go. Leaving it a little open-ended lets people sort of digest it for themselves. But if you let's say you apply on LinkedIn and you know the person that's going to get your application, they put that person's face there, use their name. I think that's fine. And then how should you tailor it based on the recipient? Should you add more technical topics if you know it's going to be a technical person reading it? Gosh, this is going to get really detailed into, it depends on so many different variables. But I think in general, a cover letter is not supposed to be an exhaustive document. Hold the hyper technical stuff for the interview and make sure what you're getting across in the cover letter isn't so much that you're, this robot who can be the most technical person, because then you're going to end up writing just paragraph after paragraph of technical stuff. What you're trying to convey in the cover letter is that you are excited about what they do and you really want to help them do it better. And so if you can do that, you're going to really set yourself up for success. So again, first paragraph, it's so exciting to see a company like yours that's trying to change the world in this way, utilizing these technologies. Second paragraph, I also utilize these technologies in my work doing X, Y, and Z. Here's a project example and why I think we'd be great working together. Paragraph 3, I can't wait to continue the conversation, learn more about the company, and see how best I can bring value to the team. Make it more about them, make it more about you two working together to solve problems, and you're going to be on the right track. All right. All right, Ankush. I start my cover letter by stating I start my cover letter by stating why I am excited and passionate about this job. But I'm a fresher. I have no industry experience or internship experience. What do you suggest? I'm actually not entirely sure what your question here is, Ankush. I think it's great to start a cover letter by stating that you're excited and passionate about the job. Like I said, the way that I like to think about it is talk about what they're doing that's awesome, talk about what you do that relates, and then talk about how you can do it together. But that's just my format, right? Ev- Everyone's going to have their own take on it. So if you want to start by talking about how passionate you are about this job, as long as you're making it more about them than you, I think you're in a good place. Now, being new to the role and new to the industry, um, can you give us a little bit more on what exactly the question here is? Are you trying to say, like, how do I back up my claim that I'm excited? If what you're trying to do is back up your claim that you're excited, talk about the projects, the personal projects you've worked on. So you need to show how you're qualified. All right. So if you truly have no experience to show, you might need to go build some of that. So you might need to create a couple personal projects or do some volunteer work or internship work or get a couple of freelance clients or something like that in order to be able to reference those things in your both resume and cover letter. But if you just don't have those things and you still want to apply, what I would recommend is just don't talk about that. Say, this is what your company does that I find really fascinating. I've taken a nano degree, or I've done whatever the thing is that I've done that has prepared me to help you in that pursuit, and I can't wait to work together. So whatever it is you have, just reference that. If it's not enough, they'll tell you, and then you can either go get more experience or find something else that you think is more important to do. But yeah, I wouldn't hold yourself back necessarily. Just talk to what you do have. And, just because you don't have an internship or something like that doesn't mean you don't have knowledge. So just talk about what you're studying right now. What are you working on? What are you trying to learn? What are you trying to build? There's so many different things and different ways that you can put this together. But I do think that give yourself a little more credit. Just because you're new to it doesn't mean you have zero things to talk about. All right. I'm just going through some of these here. All right, Adi, how can I explain employment gaps in my cover letter? This is a really good question. And I think, again, this goes down to how big is your gap? What were you doing during that gap? And how do you want to talk about it? There was someone I was chatting with once, and they said that they had this huge gap in their resume. And I was like, all right, well, what were you doing during that time? And they said, I was a professional poker player. It's a pretty new one. I hadn't gotten that before. And I was like, so why do you have an employment gap if you were a professional poker player for 4 years? They said, well, I don't want to put that on my resume because I think that it'll get looked at poorly by companies and they won't want to hire me. And I said, well, what looks worse? An employment gap where they can, if you really don't reference it, they might assume you were just sitting on the couch watching Netflix at your parents' house for 4 years, or talking about your experience as a professional poker player, which taught you how to read people, taught you how to manage your finances, taught you how to take risks and make big bets, use a little bit of that poker terminology, and also might connect you with some sports companies or marketing companies that use gambling mindsets and different things like that to create phone apps and create different things like that. So we really dug into it, and I said, you might even be in an interview someday talking to someone, and they're like, I love poker. I play poker every weekend with my buddies. And you could say, well, why don't we start like a for fun, no money, like poker tournament, or one for charity or something, and do that as like a fun thing that in the office. And now you've found someone in the company that also likes what you like, right? And you've just built a personal connection over your work history. So I do think that your employment gap depends on how you think about your employment gap. If you think negatively about your employment gap and you're trying to avoid it, they will think negatively about your employment gap and try to avoid you. And so that's what I would say. I would really want to know a little bit more about your employment gap. If it's, let's say, you stayed at home to take care of kids, there are so many organizations out there trying to help people get back into the workforce after taking care of their family. If you were on sick leave, like, that's okay. That's something you can mention if you're comfortable mentioning it. You can say, like, I was on sick leave. You don't even have to say why or what. You can just say, I was on sick leave and I had to take care of myself and my family for the past couple of years. We can really, we can be honest without being like overly graphic or honest, right? So we can talk about the reality of the situation. And the reality is that everyone's life has complications. Everyone has different things that they've done. Now, if you're currently in an employment gap, if you're looking for a job and you don't have one right now, you got to start thinking about what you're going to do today to change that gap, to close that gap. Let's say you're 3 months into the job search. You don't have a job, and all you're doing every day is searching for a job. When you go into the interview, they're going to say, what have you been doing the past 3 months? If your answer is, I've just been searching for a job, they're going to say, all right, well, why didn't you try to do anything else during that time? Why didn't you volunteer anywhere, join any professional organizations, start a meetup group, work on a project, build a side gig? Any of these things that will close that gap. And just to give a personal example, when I quit my first job, I knew it would take about 3 to 6 months to find a new gig. So I started hosting a monthly networking event that was called Idea Lemon. I did it with a buddy from college. In between the networking events, we would send email campaigns and like resources to people. We would research different types of projects. We tried to build like a journal that we might be able to sell. We did all sorts of different things. And then when I went in and I interviewed for jobs, they would ask me about my previous job, but then they say, well, what is this thing? What were you doing the last 3 to 5 months? And I'd say, oh, well, I've been building this thing on my own and I've been hosting these events. And I've been like, all right, we don't care about your last job. We care about that. That sounds interesting. And that's what we ended up talking about in all these different things. So really sit back and say, what did I do during that employment gap? Was I volunteering at, my church or something like that? You can talk about these different things in a way that is interesting and related to the job. So sit down, take a look at all the time that you spent. Maybe you were like, rebuilding your basement or something, like doing like repairs or remodels so you could sell your house. Like, that's a skill set that has translatable things. Like, I'm able to organize, I'm able to I'm able to plan a project from start to finish. All these different things. We can always, really squeeze the lemon and find some relatable skills from what people have been doing in their gaps. And so really take that time. And if you would like to share in the chat here what you've been doing, I'd be very curious to know. All right. Sanjeev, how can I show soft skills in a cover letter? This is a really good question. And I think there's a number of different things that we can think about in regards to this. The first one is, how do I show soft skills? Soft skills can be included in your LinkedIn, in your resume, and in your cover letter. But again, we need to keep in mind what each one of these things is for. Your LinkedIn is much more about the keywords and making sure that all the keywords are there so people can find you. And it's a social network so that you can stay in touch with people with micro networking interactions by commenting, liking, sharing, and doing all these other things. So that's really what LinkedIn is for at a very basic level. Your resume is for a quick scan of your employment history so that I can see like where you're coming from and maybe a few of the things that you've done that are related to this role, and kind of get a sense that like, yeah, you've been progressing over time. Your cover letter is much more about them and why you're excited about them and what value you can bring to them. So it's not so much about listing your skills and all those different things. It's more about mentioning skills that will help with the role. So if your soft skill that you want to get across is that you're a good public speaker, talk about the speeches that you've given. If the soft skill that you want to, like maybe presentations that you've done, if what you want to get across is that you're incredibly good at programming, talk about the programming projects you've created. But I would just say, like, talk about one thing, mention one or two things that support it, rather than going into incredible detail in the cover letter, because the incredible detail is what's supposed to come out during the interview. The interview is where you can really get into the nitty gritty. Say, like, my strengths are that I'm really empathetic in the office. I'm a really great communicator. I'm X, Y, and Z. And I think my favorite thing with soft skills is showing your soft skills. Don't write about your soft skills, show your soft skills, right? So the way you respond to email, the quickness in which you respond to their outreach and emails. If they give you a take-home assignment, can you get it done in 24 hours? If they say, if they're taking a long time, are you going to be following up every single day, or are you going to give them some space and check in once a week or every other week? What are the different things that you are exuding in your communication with them that will showcase your soft skills? And then if you really want to show your soft skills, maybe create some content that also elicits those skills. So you could, write an article and share it on LinkedIn that talks about a time that you have put your soft skills into action to help with a project. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but I think at the end of the day, when you're trying to get your soft skills across, and again, this depends on the soft skill, it's better to show it than to say it. All right, Mohammed, what is the difference between a cover letter and a personal statement? This is a really good one. It's actually one I haven't gotten in a very, very long time. So I'm not entirely certain what a personal statement is anymore and how that's used. So that's something I got to go do a little more research on. Karen, maybe if you have any thoughts on that, that you could add in the chat. If not, anyone else who's in the chat, please comment and share any resources on personal statements. I think it might just be a difference in verbiage about the same thing. But in general, I think, defaulting to what I've said about cover letters and making it more about them than you, I think a personal statement is inherently going to be a little bit more me focused. But if it's all just me, you might want to say, how do I inject a little bit more about them into this this statement? And if a personal statement is just like the summary on your resume, it's more of a pitch. So I do need to do a little bit more research so I know exactly where personal statements fall in the, personal pitch through interview ledger, right? We've got your pitch, your cover letter, your resume, your LinkedIn, your blah, 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 all the way to the interview. I need to do a little more research there. But I think in general, these topics still apply and these ideas still apply. If you have an example of a time that they've asked for a personal statement and not a cover letter, please add a little bit more information in the chat so we can maybe dive deeper into it. All right, Ankush writes in, could you give an example of how I might relate my limited work experience as a fresher with a position's job duties? Well, all right, so I'm going to try and dig a little deeper into this idea of being a fresher, because in general, if you don't have specific experiences that relate to that role, it's going to be tough to, like, let's say it's a technical thing. It's going to be tough to say you have technical skills when you've never done anything technical. Now, that being said, if the position says you need to be a leader, you need to be someone who is able to collaborate with different teams. If there's any number of things it could say. What you want to be able to do is look into all the different areas of your life in which you've showcased these skills. And this is similar to the gap in your resume, right? What are all the different times that I have been a supportive person, right? So let's say, and this is good for interviews too. They say, on a team, what kind of a player are you? Generic interview question, right? You could say, well, in my work, I'm very much a supporter. I'm someone who, on any given project, I will jump in where needed to get the job done. I can do a lot of different things, and I'm able to support a lot of different areas. It's a very general work-focused answer. I could also, and this is just me speaking about myself, I can also talk about, so like, let's say for work, like, hey, we need to do Q&As. Boom, I can jump in, I can do those. I've done that. I can also do emails. I can also do a number of different things. I'm kind of like a jack of all trades. I can jump in. Now take that and give a funnier example of that, right? Back when I did an escape room with a bunch of my friends, they, at the end, gave us our personality type breakdowns by the way that we were interacting in the room. And I was the supporter. I would jump in and help here. Then I would move over here. Then I would, sing and dance to keep the zombie from eating someone. And then escape rooms are these funny little, like you got to get out of the room and solve a bunch of puzzles before a zombie touches you. And so like I would kind of jump from place to place. I would do a puzzle. I'd do some song and dance. I'd do all these different things. The song and dance helped the zombie sleep. It was a weird day. But what I can say is like, use that as an example and say like, what I've been told is that I'm a supporter typically in a team. I can also give an example of feedback I've gotten from a manager. I can also give examples of in my friend group, I'm typically the person that will jump on and go into any activity. Want to go laser tag? Let's do it. Want to start a podcast? Let's do it. Want to XYZ? I'm more of a supporter, right? So it's how I get the same message across using different parts of my life. All right, friendships, family, work. So if you don't have specific work experience, or let's say your work experience is unrelated. I have someone who used to work in mental health and now they want to work in programming. How do the ideas and the work that they did in the mental health space translate into this space? Well, they're able to be very patient with clients. They can also be very patient with, they can be patient with patients, and they can also be very patient with client requests. And they have very good communication skills to be able to interpret and then analyze and then create solutions. So you might be able to relate experiences outside of quote unquote work experience that still relate. So take some online personality tests like 16 personalities and see if you can do, see if you can pull out, like really pull out some of those core attributes that you have that are really positive that maybe you don't have any specific work experience around yet, but still do relate to the position duties. I'm looking to, Sorab. I'm looking, sorry, I'm still learning how to pronounce names. So if I'm pronouncing it wrong and you have any resources on how I can learn to pronounce names, this is a very one-way thing, so I can't hear them, but I appreciate any help. Sorab, I'm looking to do PhD in robotics. I'm not sure how to write a great statement or statement of purpose. How can I integrate my nano degree experience into it? Well, again, I need to look into these statements of purpose a little bit more. It sounds kind of similar to a summary and things like that. So what I might recommend is that you ask yourself, why do you want to work in robotics? What is it about the robotics industry that stands out to you? What technologies are coming out of the robotics industry that you think are going to have the largest impact in our world? So for instance, I was talking with someone who wanted to work in voice chat, right? Well, they think that the move from, your phone and visual search to voice search is going to free up people's time. They're really excited for the opportunity for us to seamlessly interact with technology without having our hand taken up. So we have our hands to do everything we want to do. We just talk out into the world, and the world gives us answers. And they think that's a brilliant future that they want to work towards. So when you're thinking about your statement of purpose, make it bigger and still specific, right? Robotics will help the world how? And I think I've given the example of the person who wrote, I want to eliminate all human drivers from the road. It's a crazy statement, right? But really what they're saying is, I want to make the road safer. If every car is a self-driving car that has the ability to stop and change lanes and all these different things, then you're going to be able to live in a safer world with less deaths. And so you can actually get really detailed on that. Like how many lives has Uber saved because teens aren't driving under the influence anymore? Very cool stuff, right? So you're looking to do a PhD in robotics. You're not sure how to write your statement of purpose. Think about your purpose. So what is the end goal? What is the outcome of all this work you're going to do? Then narrow it a bit. So I'm really excited to do all these things, which is why I'm studying to get a PhD in robotics. And the reason I think robotics are going to have the biggest effect on this outcome is because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm super excited to study it here or work on it here because you're doing X, Y, and Z. And I really think that my personality and my approach is going to help you accomplish this. And we're going to accomplish that within the bigger picture. And that's going to lead to, a world that's safer because cars drive themselves. Something like that, okay? So when you're thinking about all these things, you got to think about narrative. You got to think about, what are we trying to get to? What is the hero's journey that we're on? And how are we getting there? Because most people just say, well, I like technology and I, learned how to program. It's like, well, so does everyone who learned how to program. You don't really get through this if you don't like technology. So go a level deeper and try and think of, now that I know how to program, how can I make an effect on the world? How can I work for a company that builds things that help people? Because that's really what we all want to do at the end of the day. We want to build things that people use. You don't want to build things that no one uses. So what is it that you want to build for someone to use? And then if they use it, what happens in their life? Even if it's like a fantasy football app, like how does that help someone's life? Well, they can connect with friends. They can have more fun. They can stay in touch, all sorts of different things. So try and think about it in that perspective. And then I'll do some more research on statement of purpose, and maybe we can get into it a little bit more next week in the Q&A. And then we have two questions here about how to integrate your nanodegree experience. Donna asks, if you have Udacity projects uploaded to GitHub, is it a good idea to put a link to your GitHub in your cover letter? Yes, I think a header in your cover letter with your name and your most prominent links is a good idea. I think one of the things that I've seen done is that, on your resume, you have like a section for links, and you can put your personal website and a number of different things. And then you can also, in your cover letter, add those in the header or the footer or wherever you might want to put them. Maybe in the signature, just put some links to your GitHub, your LinkedIn, and some other places. And then make sure that your personal website, your GitHub, and your LinkedIn link out to all the different things that you've built. All right. Our next question is from Raul. How can I get an internship? I love this. I think we're going to wrap up on this question. So it looks like we got through almost all of them today, I hope. But yeah, if you have more questions, of course, you can share them, and we'll keep them in mind for next week or bring them with to next week's session, which Karen will be linking to if you'd like to sign up for it after this call. But how do I get an internship? You get an internship the same way you get a job. You need to, number one, network. Number two, improve your application materials. Number three, apply to companies that you are currently trying to build a network into. And number four, create an online presence that backs up all of the things that you're saying. So let's see if I can remember those four and go into more detail. Number one, you have to know what you want, and you have to start applying to those things. I'm going to go out of order. You have to know what you want, and you have to start applying to those things. Where do you want to work? Meaning industry, and let's say your favorite companies, and then who are their competitors and collaborators, and put together sort of a mind map of all those companies so you can start finding your way in. Who do you need to meet? You need to meet people who are doing the job that you wish you had right now. So reach out to interns. Go on the LinkedIn people search and say, who's working in this industry? Let's say it's self-driving cars, and who's an intern? I'm going to go talk to those interns. I'm going to ask them how they got that job. I'm going to ask them if they like that job. And then I'm going to ask them who I should talk to. Who do they recommend I connect with in order to learn more? They'll connect you with their manager. Their manager will say, hey, we are always hiring interns. Let's bring you on board. You also want to have a great online presence that can back that up and application materials that are solid. So your application materials don't have to be the greatest thing on the planet Earth. I used to think that. I used to think it all needed to be perfectly designed and all these things. It just needs to be easy to read, easy to understand, and it's more of a check mark at the end of the day. If they've met you and they like you, the best thing that could happen is they look at your resume and go, yeah, that looks good. All right, let's talk, right? What are your skills? And now you're in the interview process, right? So figure out what you want. Start narrowing your focus so that you can apply in a very tactical, focused way. Create your online materials, your application materials, so that they support what you're going to say in the interview. And then last but not least, stay connected with people, network, comment on posts, do different things, update your LinkedIn, update your profiles, make sure that your website actually shows what you can do. And if you do all these things, you're not only going to be able to get an internship, you're going to be able to continue to grow throughout your career. Typically, people change jobs every 2 to 4 years now. It's kind of crazy. It's moving up and up and up. So it's not just about the first internship. It's about the next 5 moves that you make over the next 10 to 20 years, So I hope this was helpful. We have a link that we're going to be putting in the chat to join us next week. So please sign up if you'd like to come back out and ask more questions. Anything that pops into your head right after we hang up and you're like, oh, I wish I asked that. And if there's anything else that we can help you with, please don't hesitate to reach out via our student support or LinkedIn, different places like that. I also highly recommend that you connect with each other. So if you have your LinkedIn and you want to be open to connecting, please share that in the chat. You can follow us on both YouTube and on LinkedIn. So you can follow our LinkedIn page or go to YouTube and hit follow, and you'll get all of our career tips as well if you'd like to go check those out there. And we have a number of webinars coming up related to careers that will be very helpful for you as well. We got some noise starting up in the background, so I'm going to wrap up today's call. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure digging into what makes a great cover letter with you, and also getting into our nice little tangent questions that, the job search is a rough process. So I just love seeing all of you coming together, supporting each other, asking questions, and really trying to figure these things out rather than procrastinating and, trying to ignore the reality of the situation, which is we're all trying to learn. We're all trying to improve in our careers, and we're all trying to get to that next level. So good luck in your search. Feel free to reach out to me with any more questions, and I wish you the best of luck. Cheers.